This is today's business leaders. Actionable advice from real-world professionals. And now here's your host, Gabe Arnold.
All right, today we have Tim Forrest on with us. I'm very excited to kind of hear what his story is and learn about his career. He's spent a lot of years doing various different things and has a very successful consulting company now. But it has done some very different things over the years. And as always, our goal on the show is to just kind of share, successes and strategies, and also some failures and anything that other entrepreneurs can learn from. Because I have learned over my 20 years as an entrepreneur that there are some lonely times, there are some difficult times, and there are pieces or seasons where we just don't know where to turn. So our goal, as always with the show, is to give people inspiration and resources to, keep going and keep growing in their career. So thanks so much for being on today with us, Tim.
Hey, thanks, Gabe. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk with you and share anything that you'd like to talk about from my work and my journey.
Awesome. Fantastic. And just a little side note, so people kind of know kind of how Tim and I connected. We connected in a Facebook group called The Secret Team. And in my own personal experience, of all the things I do on Facebook, we spend tens of thousands of dollars for our clients on Facebook every month and make them a lot of money. And we do that, for our own companies, and I have a lot of fun with that. But for me, the highest value I get out of Facebook is all the groups that I'm in, and the Secret Team has been that as well. So just a little nugget for everybody listening. If you're not active in Facebook groups for some reason, definitely find one in your niche or, with a community of entrepreneurs. Because there's just a ton of value and you get to meet awesome people like Tim. So why don't you start us out, Tim, by just sharing, when you first realized that you were an entrepreneur or that you wanted to get into entrepreneurship, and what that led you to as far as your first business or your first experience.
Yeah, I mean, it really started early on. I can remember in first grade selling pepper, if you can believe it, door to door. And then later on, starting little businesses for Christmas money. I would harvest mistletoe from the trees and bag it up. And the little cute thing that I did is I created a little history of mistletoe and made copies of that and put it in the little baggies. And I, sold out all the mistletoe I could every year. And so that really got me going. And then what really led me probably to where I am today, several things. But I read in high school, I read the book, the Napoleon Hill book on Think and Grow Rich, okay. And then the other book, I think Schwartz is the author, but but The Magic of Thinking Big. Those two books kind of galvanized and has led to almost everything that I've done. Particularly when you consider my dad was an iron worker, and I really had no business contacts, and I knew I had to do something besides people that I knew and friends and family as far as like working in business and moving forward in a career. So, I wanted to be in sales and marketing. My first job, once I graduated university, was actually loading trucks in my industry. And that's where I started pulling orders for consumer product goods retailers. And that's been 30 years ago. And, fast forward, I've been consulting for 20 years. And my consulting company just in October experienced their 20th year. And I've professionally spoken globally around the world at different events, and I've actually gone from one of those initials when I was loading the food trucks. I eventually got to drive a truck, and then one of my first deliveries was to one of the largest retailers, major retailer in the United States, and I was actually recently on their private jet to help lead a group of retail executives on a field trip, looking for opportunities in their retail locations. And I'm the one that actually organized the 2-day trip for the team. And it's just it's just funny, amazing how it all has kind of come full circle there. And just from loading those food trucks 30 years ago, had no idea it was going to lead to what's going on and all the things that have happened in my world since then.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you started out there, and then after all the years and all the success, you're ending back helping the same kind of folks again.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. I mean, looking back on it, hindsight, I mean, I totally get it, because I went on, I worked with the largest food brands, some of the largest brands in the world. I've worked for brands that there's only a few brands that have made $1 billion in profit, and so I worked for them and learned from them, and I followed their kind of their templates for success, and I've been able to help entrepreneurs achieve similar results, but yet with a lot less expense and a lot less work, because we kind of used a lot of the templates, a lot of the methods and styles of going after a market that they used, but I'm able to do it on a much smaller level and just apply it sound marketing strategies to help them grow their business. And I've been very successful. I've had my clients are approaching $1 billion in sales results from the activities that we put together. You know, I've had clients, I've helped entrepreneurs turn businesses around, and we've sold those businesses for over $100 million. I've helped, and that they were losing business. I just recently, in 2015, I helped a company figure out did the ideation behind understanding the value of their business, so they could go to Wall Street. They did an initial round fundraising of $16 million, and then in the coming few months, if all goes well, they're going to be issuing an IPO, and so they're expected to bring in $200 to $400 million from that IPO, which is very exciting. And I'm happy to be a part of that. Zacon Foods is the company.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've never been a part of an IPO. I've had a couple partners that have done that and been close to it, but never been a part of that. That sounds like it would be quite the exciting experience.
Yeah, it is. On my board, I'm lucky to have on my board. I have a board of advisors for my group, and one of them, he worked for he was a leader of the company, and did a lot of different things, but they were a publicly traded company. But he shared with me, a lot of people want to quote unquote ring the bell, do an IPO, but if you're not the right company and not the right in the right position to do that, it really puts a tremendous burden on the business. And it's not just to do that. It's not really something, that you necessarily, if you can avoid it, I would say avoid it. But at the same time, I know a lot of people are interested in that and think that's, look at that as a goal.
Yeah. What do you think are because I've heard both sides of that, and I've even worked with partners who sell a small portion of their company into a publicly traded company so that they can accelerate, I think it's FCC requirements. You would know better than me. Whatever the maybe it's not FCC. There's
sure. They do like a reverse. I mean, yeah, I know what you're talking. I know exactly what you're talking about. So they have access to the capital markets through
right.
that.
Yeah, it's like a. You would know better than me, but the way I understood it was like you sell a small portion of your company into a larger company that's publicly traded, then you have like direct access or easier way to IPO your own company. But that part aside, when does it make sense to pursue that as a goal, and when does it not make sense in your opinion, since you've been able to watch this? Yeah. No,
I don't do a lot of that, so I'm just going to share with you. I've heard if you're not at $300 million in revenue or above, the accounting becomes very onerous, and it's something that happens. You've got to keep up, and it takes a team effort, and it's a tremendous amount of the workload on it is not necessarily for the faint of heart or for smaller entrepreneurial groups, and so that's something that some people may or may not think about. It's just the demands of reporting to the SEC are so great that you want to be able to, naturally cover that with your accounting group. And a lot of companies, smaller companies, under 300 million, sometimes don't really want to spend a lot of time there. But there's a lot better people. I don't, some of my clients are $1 billion companies, but that's not my normal business. So I don't. All my clients. This is the first IPO that any of my clients have done. I'm excited to be a part of that, but this isn't something that happens every day with my clients.
Gotcha. So it's definitely something for bigger companies that have the financial team to make it happen.
Yeah, yes, exactly, and because the stress and the details and the regulations involved, it just is. It takes, if you're an entrepreneur or in growth mindset, you really. this is what I advise all my clients is like, you don't want to be spending all your time with production issues, and you don't want to be spending all your time with compliance issues if you're trying to grow a business. And
Yeah. No kidding.
so that's kind of my take on it. And that's where I want to avoid that. But at the same time, if you're looking to scale, you have the ability, if you raise whatever amount of money you're going to raise, and you have the opportunity to deploy that money, and you've got an understanding of how it's going to be spent, what the return will be on that, then go for it and think about it. But it does change things when it happens.
And this is a question I don't know if you've had experience with, but just kind of comes to mind. What do you think is the difference or the strategy between just going for private investors or VCs over going to an IPO? If you're in the smaller size and you're under 100 million a year, and you talk about you have a strong model, you know what you would do with the money, you can get good return on it. Is there a reason why you would go IPO instead of to just an investment group, a VC or some hedge fund or something like that?
Yeah, well, what happens a lot of time. I mean, the natural flow of it is you kind of get taken there. So What happens? It depends on the size of the group, and then once you get to once you begin to take on money from professional investors at the VC level, they're going to be thinking about that event and potentially looking at what is that financial event that's going to give them the return. So if they put in, whatever the amount they put in, they're going to be looking for, say, 10x of that amount, and they're going to be thinking about IPO, and is that going to happen in 5 years, 8 years, 10 years? So you kind of, at that level, that's sort of, I hate to say dictated to you, but it's a part of the game per se. So
Gotcha.
That's going to happen. But early on, for like most of my clients, there's a lot of different processes. Number one, no one really wants to invest in a business if they don't understand how their investment is going to turn a return. And so many entrepreneurs, so many people that think they want to start a business, they're looking for investors to help prove the idea is viable. And investors don't want to do that. That's not, when I've helped raise quite a bit of money, and that's not what they're looking for. They're looking to, how can they put money into this business, and what will be the return of that investment? So they don't want to understand, well, we want to hire, we're going to see, we want to create this product and see if there's a market for it. They'd like to see that there's a market and a product that exists and customers with revenue. And so but it's just say you're in a region of the country or a segment, and their money will help you move to bring on 2 additional country, managers, so you can expand the business in other parts of the country. Just real simple things like that. And so early on, though, and answer your question, Gabe, you're asking about investment and investors. Early on, you're going to need to invest in your business. You're going to need to drive it. You're going to need to, your primary investment vehicle in a lot of business is going to be your primary job, your day job, and then expand and grow it. And then later down the road, when you have friends and family that are they believe in you and they want to help you and assist you, they'll put money in, not necessarily on that strong of a business case, but just because they know you and they're excited, they want you to be successful, and they're willing to put some money in. If you can find those family and friends, those early investors, and then later on you're going to go to more established investors of
angels. Yep.
Yeah, ahead of that, and then kind of go down that path, and then end up with VCs potentially or other mechanisms. But if you can avoid it, if you can grow, if you're able to self-fund it or grow from customers and profits, that's ideal. That's that's the ideal to keep that going. But if you can, it's better though to have a smaller piece of a bigger business than just to control it all.
Yeah, that's always the balancing factor that I've thought about or heard, and I've had small partners or very small investments in some of my companies. I've never gotten to the stage of VC or considering IPOing, but I think people forget the thing you just mentioned, which is a great point. Is number one, like, professional investors want to invest in a working model. They don't want to. Yes. They're not your alpha and beta testers. That's your friends and family if you're lucky. Your friends and family around. And then, on top of that, everybody thinks, oh, it'd be awesome to, go on Shark Tank or meet with some big VC group or some hedge fund and get an investor. But sometimes I hear people talk about that, and I don't know if they've thought about the concept of that's awesome and it could accelerate growth, but you immediately gained a partner and a boss, because nobody that's going to give you 200,000 or 2 million or 100 million or whatever they decide to give you, nobody's going to sit idly by if they're a professional investor and just let you make your decisions. They're actively involved, especially in the beginning. So you get a partner / boss in some senses, and that's counter to what a lot of entrepreneurs went into business for themselves, to do in the beginning. They're not necessarily looking for that. Not that it's it can be a great marriage, a great partnership, but it's definitely different. So
there's a couple little fun little tricks, or I hate to call them tricks, but just things that I learned with money. Two things. One, a lot of professional investors that invest, we've all heard that they're investing in people, and that's really the persons that are behind the idea. Obviously it needs to be a solid and great idea, but really the guys that are putting money in, it's going to be more about who approaches them with the idea and how they're approached than it is with the actual idea, because they're approached by 50 or 100 ideas per day.
Yeah.
And it's the ones that get to them through contacts of a network of people are the ones that get funded generally. And so that's one thing. The second piece, I learned this early on when I was working with on a project, and I never had heard this before. And the guy telling me is like, Tim, you got to talk to someone that can stroke a check for the amount that you're asking for. And I'm like, okay, wow, I'd never heard that before. And I was like, that seems kind of odd. But it's really that simple. Can they write a check for the amount that you're seeking for your business? And then, of course, I kind of shared that earlier. You really don't want to ask for money, and professional investors don't want to give you money until they know with certainty that when they deploy that, or some sense of certainty when it's deployed, what the return will be of that. And so that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard too, and I don't know if you may be closer to it and know real stats or have some personal firsthand experience. I've heard that if you are going to go after higher level angel or VC, round funding, that you should expect to pitch, a few hundred times to land one investor. I think it's a pretty significant number of pitches and contacts that you from a numbers and statistical standpoint, you have to really be aggressive in reaching out.
That sounds right. I've heard those numbers. The money that I've raised, though, that's not the way it's worked out for me. The way that it worked out, and this has been so much of the success in my businesses and the people that I've worked with, has been the people I'm connected to. And so instead of pitching the idea, I basically went to warm leads and people that I knew and talked to them about the opportunity. And so again, that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about who approaches the VC, with the idea. That's, for me, the money that I've raised and be able to help with, it's come from friends or friends of friends, or friends that know someone at a distance, and that's really where the money came from. It wasn't just going cold to groups.
Yeah,
great idea, because the idea is so solid. It needs to be connected to people, and that's what's worked for me in my situations.
Yeah, that's definitely the fastest route. I would agree too. Because if you get an introduction, then you're halfway there, because it's exactly a credibility mark, and your friend's not, who introduced you, in theory at least, isn't going to risk introducing you to one of their friends and it be a dud idea or whatever. So,
right. And then also these guys, they know the great ideas, the great PowerPoints, the great presentations, the great projections, the great marketing plans. All that's going to change. If you think about it, you may have heard this already, but if you think about the way businesses change and the things that happen, like Samsung, I've got an Android phone. Samsung started out as a fish company, dried fish company. And so
I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yes, sir. It is crazy. And so almost every successful business, you can look at how the business has turned from their original start to where they are today. And you can look at Marriott Hotels and their background and how, just different different things. It's never
What you
exactly
thought.
as planned.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I don't know who says this, but I found it to be true for years in my own entrepreneurial expense. I don't know who originally says, but the saying is, if you ask for money, you'll get advice, and if you ask for advice, you'll get money. And for my own projects that I've ever raised a little bit of money for, or helped people raise small amounts of money, nothing huge. The biggest one was like 200,000. It's always started out with asking for advice, and then it leads to like, oh, I'm really interested in it. How can I be involved? Are you interested in having an investor? Like, it converts to that, which is kind of a weird phenomenon, but it's definitely true.
Yep, that makes total sense, and that's a small part. I mean, I enjoy the fundraising that I've done is a portion of what I do, and what's so successful for my clients is I help them to really navigate and grow their business and find new markets and expand in those markets. And the fundraising has just happened naturally as a course of working with the teams that I work with, and that's just occurred over time. But really what kind of sets me apart, or what's helped me to help my clients be so successful, is understanding how to bring products to market and finding areas and opportunities, and then exploiting those opportunities. And I do that by focusing on channels. So when I find success, I want to exploit that channel that customer resides in, because there's some reason that I'm successful there. And I try to take a lot of action so that I can find those opportunities, because I don't always know them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good kind of segue to what I wanted to ask you about next. I look at the brands you've worked with, like, Hershey's and Tyson and Simpson's Furniture, and then you have Rite Aid. I mean, and you have a pretty diverse set of like products / industries that I see here. What's been the common thread of like how you go in, assess things, and then help them build that marketing strategy and move into those right channels? Because it's not like from furniture to chocolate is a little bit of a different thing, I would assume.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm working with a music company right now on a music product globally. So you're right, it is diverse. But number one, I want to understand where they are. With my clients, I like to understand where they are right now. So, really where are you? If you have facilities, I like to walk through the facilities, but just totally get an understanding of their current market and look at, a simple way to do that is to pull their purchase orders over the last month and say, okay, who ordered from you in the last month? Who are your customers? Mm-hmm. And then I like to segment those customers and understand what type of customer they are, where do they fall? And in particular, a trick that I use is real simple, is I use the NAICS codes for the businesses. So I look up the business types if I don't know them already. I mean, it may be very obvious who they are, but if you don't know them, look up the type of business they are. And then I like to understand, some general understanding, the census of their current customer base, mm-hmm. and start to ask questions about, are they success, where are the most profitable segments, what's growing, who are they doing? Like, for instance, with Dyson vacuums, I worked with their commercial products division and did exactly what we're talking about. And so I interviewed some sales, different folks on the team, and then understood that their most profitable account, just so simple, was medical, was in the medical side. They were looking at restaurants and hospitality, but medical was where the big opportunity was. So what we did is I just built databases of for that particular opportunity. I put together databases for medical, and in particular hospitals, medical groups around the country, mm-hmm. and then built these spreadsheets and deployed those to the sales team, and it resulted in almost double the business. I think it was like 80%, 83% in 1 year increase in business, along with the largest new account for the business, the largest account and the largest orders they ever had in a division history came from those spreadsheets. It was a hospital group that ordered a lot more. And it came specifically from what we're talking about, as far as looking at their customers and thinking about channels and who's the most profitable and biggest opportunity channels for their business, and then building a spreadsheet, building a customer list, and then going after those customers. It's just so very simple stuff.
Yeah, I've never thought of what you just mentioned. That's brilliant. Of just looking at like a customer list or a list of orders and looking up their NCIS codes to determine how your groupings fall. So with that project with Dyson, you mentioned the medical was the most profitable, which makes sense. That seems logical to me. Do you recall, like, when you looked at all their orders, everything they're doing, was that a large percentage of the customer base, or did you just identify this as
No, it was not. It was not. Just what I found out was some of the larger orders were going to medical facility. The profitability wasn't. It was the size of the revenue. It was profitable, but one of the thing that stood out in that particular was the size of the orders. Instead of ordering like onesie, twosies, they were like double-digit orders, and as far as unit sales at a time.
Gotcha.
And so that was what triggered that. And I was like, wow, this one has 12 compared to the other. So then we did that. And so I've done that. I've done that repeatedly. So for instance, it could be convenience stores or club stores. So I've helped 22 different vendors go sell to Sam's and Costco, BJ's, and the club store channel. And once you understand the needs of that segment, then you can focus the supplier and the business on that particular segment. So, for instance, QVC television.
Mm-hmm.
It took me once I decided it'd be a cool opportunity for a brand to get on QVC television. So I decided that was something I wanted to do, and so I started working on that. It took me 4 years to get my first item on QVC television.
Wow.
But once I understood the process, and obviously I'm doing a lot of other things, but once I understood that process, I was able to get, just in a very short period of time, 11 additional items on there. Once I'd already been through it once, and so I'm kind of taking that same strategy to apply it to my clients and help grow their business.
That's awesome.
And so so many entrepreneurs, when I work with them, they think of accounts. They want to go after this account. They want this account. They want this particular account in their state or in their region of the country. They're going after this account. Instead of thinking, I want to go after this channel, I want to go after this market segment, I'm interested in this. And so when they think like that, it allows them all of a sudden, that one account that's nearby they're going after, it opens up an entire world to them, and it allows them to grow their business very quickly.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. And it's something I think that I've struggled with over the years, of figuring out how to choose that right niche or that right channel or what to go after, and something I'm actually working on with one of my business mentors right now.
The reason you're having that issue more than likely, and this comes from working with the largest brand, some of the largest brands in the world, is because of the amount of action that you're taking. Because small entrepreneurs don't have the resources and the effort to really take massive amounts of action, and to do all the resources to do everything that the larger guys will do. And also, you don't want to make mistakes. You can't afford it. If you're a small, you can't afford to make mistakes. So you're seeking like 100% guarantee results, instead of failing 8 or 9 times and then on the 10th time going, wow, this really works well, and then focusing on finding more of those 10s and then avoiding all the other 9s. And so that's what in my experience, that's what has worked for me, is that I've been able to, I haven't shared with you. I can share with you, $1 million. It took me, $1 million success stories of taking a business idea from, it was just an idea from, we just on paper and a concept to, going to market and having the initial order was $1 million for that particular business, or helping others to grow into different channels. But at the same time, that there's been a tremendous amount of pain and learning in areas that didn't work out, and so that's what the 30 years of experience has offered me and my clients specifically.
Yeah, that's definitely the value of someone like yourself. I mean, having all that history behind you is what is the value for sure. Because, like I said, I started kind of my entrepreneurial career when I was 16 and built and sold my first website, and from there, tech and marketing and digital has been my thing.
Awesome.
But I was young, and I feel like the first 10 years of being an entrepreneur, I was crashing around, and I learned a few things. And now the second decade of being an entrepreneur, I'm I kind of know what I'm doing, and I've learned a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm starting to hit that, point where I feel like I'm actually credible, and maybe I know a few things, and all those years of crashing around actually are paying off today.
Right. Yes.
10, 15 years later, even though it was painful and up and down and all over the place. But yeah, that's definitely the,
I
definitely the value that you get, because somebody that
Yeah.
hires me or you, they don't have to do it all wrong for 10 years. So,
Right. Exactly. And the benefit for me also, I may not have, I've made a boatload of errors and mistakes and, experienced so many issues and problems. But also, the wonderful thing for me has been the people. I've literally worked with some of the best in the world, and so I've learned from them. And so much of what I do is learning, is copy. I hate to say copy, but I learn their methods and their ways of doing business. And I just can't share enough how the people that I worked with, the internships I had in school with some really smart marketing folks, and then along with the sales and marketing leadership I had, some of the working with big brands, has led to so much of what I do. And then even with all that, I still have so many learning opportunities where I just had different issues. You don't get the order, you have problems. I had a Walmart buyer one time take my business card, wad it up in a ball, and then throw it at me across the desk.
wow.
Trying to intimidate me. Yeah, no, that's what I thought. I was like, oh my, this has never happened. This is unbelievable. And so, like, just don't get it. I kept saying in my mind, just don't allow them to upset you, Tim. Don't get upset. Don't get upset. That situation, it just, things like that. I also had, luckily, it didn't bother me, but I had worked several days on a presentation for a national buyer, and then he just took the presentation and threw it across the desk. Said, I'm not reading this book. And so, but that helped me to really understand. It really galvanized for me a big lesson, and it's all about them and their problems and what their needs are. And that's the other thing is you can learn to speak their language, whatever the business is. The closer you can mimic or learn the language of their particular industry, the more successful. We talked about channels. Now go deeper and understand their business and their problems and their needs, and that's what they're looking for. And if you have that and understand that, your sales presentation literally can be a tablet and a pen. You just walk in, take notes, or use your phone or your digital tablet and take notes in that. But I mean, it literally, instead of being a presentation, you could actually be resolving their needs. And some of my biggest sales calls, you want to call them that, have been where I went in with a note, with a pen and paper, and took notes on what their needs were and resolved the problem. Which it sounds like with your tech background, you've probably had a lot done that as well. It's probably been a big part of what you do.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. I think when you go in with that attitude of I'm here to solve your problem, it doesn't really matter what you have on your presentation or your report or your proposal. If you listen and hear their pain and then show them how you're going to solve it, they kind of don't care about the fine print, because if you've built the rapport, if you have some trust, if you can show them how it can be done, then it's like, sure, let's do it. Because I know I have some major objectives for next year for my company. It's end of the year. I'm starting to think about that. If somebody walked in and said, here is the exact step-by-step process that we're going to follow to solve these problems for you, and here's the cost and, whatever. And if it fit my budget, I'd be like, all right, let's do it. It's not, you wouldn't even think about it if they had listened well and delivered the solution. So that's definitely a good point, because all the fancy presentations in the world don't sell things. It's a lot more than that, or maybe it's simpler than that. So,
right.
Yeah.
As much. I agree with you.
So
it's really as simple as their problems and needs and speaking their language.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always tell my young salespeople that come into our team, I always say, if you listen to your prospect, they give you all the keys to close. And it's the same thing. Like, people will say, if you just listen, if you can ask one or two open-ended questions and then just shut up and listen, it's pretty easy to close from there if you're paying attention, is how I feel. You mentioned something that kind of sparked, a train of thought for me about, with Dyson, how you identified that channel. But then after that, you said, obviously that's that's harder to think about or execute on as a small company. So maybe a company that's doing, 500,000 a year, or maybe approaching $1 million, year, if they were to use your process, look at the last few months of, orders, and identify, okay, I know that I'm in this market segment frequently. I like these customers. It's profitable. That part seems, that's a simple approach to look at and apply and kind of segment who you've done business with. The next step feels scary to me, just thinking it through of, okay, now that I know that we're going after the medical, or we're going after service companies, or we're going after whatever, channel we've decided is a good approach. Now, how do we throw our resources into that? How do we focus in and do that right? Because you talked about kind of like failing a few times or figuring out what's working. And for a bigger company to blow 10 grand, 100 grand on something and it doesn't work, is not as big a deal as if you're a super small company. So how would you think about that at a smaller size?
Well, I'm looking, everything that I do, I want to stair step. So we want to stair step success from where they are currently. And so we may not, depending on the opportunity, it may not be a new channel. It might be, they're already servicing a channel. They just don't realize it's a channel. And then we're just going to simply expand into that market. So they might already be serving a part of the market. And so there might be the opportunity to serve more of that market. And so everything depends. It might be we want to introduce new products. It might be raising the price. Like I helped one entrepreneur, one of the projects I'm working on right now, when we first started working together, their pricing, I've helped them this is what's unbelievable. So many entrepreneurs, this is perfect price. I would talk about this, but so many entrepreneurs undercharge for their product.
Yes.
And they think it's a business issue, but really it's a self-esteem issue. Pricing in the market is a self-esteem issue, I find so often, as compared to a true market issue. And case in point, a client that I'm working with right now, we've literally raised the pricing on their product over 500% since I started working with them. And sales are growing and have actually expanded internationally. And it only makes common sense. It expanded internationally now because of raising the price. And you're probably thinking, Gabe, what are you talking about, Tim? How can you raise the price, and why does it make sense? How is it that they're raising the price? What's happened is when we were talking earlier about production, they've brought in instead of focusing on manufacturing, they've brought in additional suppliers that do the manufacturing for them, and they've spent more of their resources on marketing, going to trade shows, getting out of production facility and out into the market, and driving new sales, working on new, internet initiatives, online initiatives, as you mentioned, groups, and along with their sales effort, branding, and getting a new website put up. So they're thinking about growing their business instead of being producing and stuck in production in their business and dealing with that. And that's really what and so many times, so many different entrepreneurs, I've helped them to do that. And that's really so often, if you don't have that margin later on down the road, when you go to look for investors, it's not going to allow investors to come into the business either, and really expand and really grow that business quickly with that. So that's something that's really important, is the pricing.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would 1,000% agree that it's 99% of the time it's a self-esteem issue.
Right.
Because when you start up and like when you're bootstrapping or when you're just trying to figure it out on your own, there's a tendency to start really low and do like a cost plus pricing.
Yes.
And in that stage, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because I've actually in my own businesses and seen other businesses come in and grab some market share that way. But only if it's strategic, and it doesn't have to be done that way, but if it's strategic and then you're moving up and increasing pricing and losing the bad customers and keeping the good customers, then it's fine. But I think that people can start there, get stuck with really low pricing, and then, like you said, there's no profit for them, for investors. The business can't grow. You're just. It's like you might as well just go get a job, because you're working a job. You're not building a company.
Exactly.
And yeah, I've experienced that a few years ago. I helped one of my clients double their prices, and it's been just dramatically, it's been dramatic for them because it's been a huge increase, and they're growing and they're stable now. And then I experienced the same thing with one of my products. It was kind of a pet project that I started a few years ago, and February of this year, we tripled prices on our base product and then introduced a product that was 6 times more expensive than our original product. And I was like, you know what? I know this is the right thing to do. This is what I would tell my clients to do, but it's always hard to do when it's your own business.
Right.
But I'm like, I'm going to do this and, let things fall where they may, because I know this is the right principled decision. But I was afraid. I mean, I think everybody's afraid when you do something crazy. Yeah. It feels crazy. And exactly. we did not have not a blip of negative, downturn in sales. Same volume of sales, and and the product obviously doubled and tripled as far as volume and profitability. And it's a simple way to grow your business and, like you said, position yourself to be able to market more or bring on investors or give yourself a well-deserved raise or whatever you need to do next.
Exactly. And then also pricing has to be pricing is a component of perceived quality. And for instance, I had a mentor about 12 years ago suggest I kind of do something similar to what you just described, but it was a lot more dramatic. It was unbelievable. This program I put together and put out there for my consulting company, I never even imagined. So I was thinking about trying to, I was so caught up with my own ego and myself and my business. I'm trying to create programs that I would purchase, that I would buy, that I would help. So, but my mentor, he helped me to understand, Tim, you've got to put together this type of program. And I'm just like, I cannot even comprehend who in the world would buy this program? Who could afford this? And so sure enough, I did what he said, and it took about 9 months. And then I had my first client that was personally worth over $100 million.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, and it made total sense. He had a home on Fifth Avenue in New York. He also had a home in Beverly Hills. And he ended up, it's kind of a fun story, the different things I did with him. But the point being, if he's not going to purchase a $500, $200, $300 program.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy goes out to eat dinner probably. His bills
$5,000.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he had one time I was on the phone with him, and you my background. I just shared with you. Loading trucks and
started at the bottom like me.
Exactly, And so I'm on the telephone with him. We're working on a project. I did get him on national television. He commercially published a book on some of the things that we did, and so he's experienced a lot of success. But my point being, one time I was on the phone with him, and he said, and he kind of, as we were talking, he stopped just for a second to talk to his butler in the background. He said, I forgot the guy's name. He's like, James, I think it's going to rain today. Would you hand me the umbrella, please? And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is from a different world. But his grandfather had invested in Coca-Cola, was an early investor in Coca-Cola, and he and his brother had inherited literally a fortune. And he was literally was at lunch with Martha Stewart and wanted to do some big things in food. And so he called me and we kind of worked through a lot of the issues and things that he had, and we changed the name of his company on the branding, and that ended up being the title of his book. And then he went on national television, and we created some neat products, and we had a lot of luck, and it was an exciting time.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely half of entrepreneurship is mindset. That's for sure, maybe more.
Yes.
And
right.
I remember a few years ago with the client I mentioned where we doubled their prices. I kind of used a concept that I learned years ago from an early mentor of mine, and from a book, The 21 Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. I think it's that book, but it's one of his books where he talks about, like, if you're going to make a big change, then your ideal for an organization is to, like, talk to your inner circle of leaders about it, and then they talk to their reports, and then you roll out, the change so that there's not this big shock to the organizational system. And right. So I was sharing with this, with my client, we were sitting down having a kind of a team meeting and sharing what was going to happen. And the reaction from some of the kind of mid-level managers and leaders there was like, oh my gosh, I mean, that's just way too much. This is going to be crazy. And something I said, which I, after the fact, learned that I offended them, which wasn't the goal, but I said, look out in the parking lot right now. I'm like, look at the clients' cars that are in here. And I'm like, if they can't afford an extra $200 or $300 a month, then we're crazy. Like, there's BMW and Cadillac and Lexus and nice cars. And I said, just as one indicator, I'm like, that's not the only indicator of how to look at it. But if we look at our existing demographic, we probably aren't attracting customers because we're charging too little. Just like you said, if you would have had a $500 program, the guy would have never valued what you were going to do, and it wouldn't have been a customer, and you wouldn't have solved the problem. So charging enough actually solved his problem, which is crazy to think about. So definitely a good story. And I've experienced different things. And so what I was saying is, like, when that team member on this client's team said that, I said, you're just projecting your own view of pricing and money from an internal perspective, or your own thought process about it. I'm like, that's not actually how we serve the customer. And serving the customer at the highest level means charging appropriately so we can grow and add more services, and so they value it appropriately. So It's definitely, it's all mindset when it comes to pricing, that's for sure.
Exactly.
or a big piece of it at least. So yeah, very cool. Well, a couple other questions for you. You mentioned something really interesting, and I think your success stories have been really helpful, and great examples, and obviously where we all want to go. But you mentioned something in the notes that you sent over to me about how you started a company and never signed a customer, and then closed it. what was that? What was that like? And tell us more about that, and like what was the learning, the lesson at the end of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you think about here we are, we're talking about my run here, 20 years, Tim Forrest Consulting, Yahoo. I've been and this year is 20th year. I started in October of '97, and so October of 2017, it's awesome. The 20-year anniversary. Now, but I don't put it. Maybe I should start putting that in there in my little bio. But the thing is, though, the first 2 times I started this company, Tim Forrest Consulting, the first time I started it, I did not get a single customer, not a single customer. And in I only had 30 days. I had in my mind, I'm 30 days, and then I've got to go back, because I had car notes, I had living expenses, I didn't have enough savings, and so I had 30 days to make this work, or I'm going to be, I have to do something different. And so after 30 days, I thought I could just go out there, call my buddies and friends up, and also not just buddies and friends, but also because I was, quote unquote, so good, I could literally call people cold and convince them to hire me. But 30 days, that was done. I was done. I couldn't get a single customer, and so I closed the doors, and I took a job. I went back to working for someone else, and then just shortly, I still wanted to, I still was motivated and really wanted to do it. So about 2 years later, I tried it again, and I was roughly in the same financial position. At this time, I probably had 2 car notes, a lot of expenses, a lot of debt, a lot of things. So, but I started again. This time, I was able to secure 1 customer, and I was just barely making it. Mm-hmm. And then my supplier in that particular deal, my supplier basically cut me off. And so that they ended up, that 1 customer and that 1 bit wasn't enough to carry me forward. So then I had to go back into, go back into employment. And then it was a third time, this business I started in '97. I literally started with only 2 customers the first year, but we did $2 million. I was able to do $2 million the first year. First 5 months, or goose egg, 0, 0, 0, just 5 months of no revenue.
Jeez, scary.
It was very scary, very scary. And then, lucky, success, whatever, it hit. And then I had closed the year out $2 million in revenue. And then I've gone on to do, with everything a lot of the things that we've been talking about. It's been very exciting.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear too, because I think for all the good ideas, like your current very successful business, I could say for myself, I know I have hundreds of bad ideas. um, and hundreds of bad, business starts, or maybe not hundreds, but it's dozens of. I started something first of this year that I thought was going to be great, and I was 5 months into it, and it was like there's no traction. I'm like, well, I got to shut it down.
Wow.
And going back to work for a little bit, to refund your startup even
Yep.
two or three times. Honestly, I feel like that's what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to, in a sense, kind of eat crow and deal with something that didn't work, and then go, and then try again.
Yeah, you're right, Gabe. And so many entrepreneurs need to understand that. I don't know the numbers, but it's probably not been written about enough. But entrepreneurs, more businesses are probably funded by a first job than anyone even realizes or understands in any of the entrepreneurial press. Because so many of my clients, they're working full-time jobs and they're hiring me to help grow their business. And so that's what, I think that's a big thing that people don't realize is that, if not majority of businesses are funded that way, as a bunch of them. I wish I knew the numbers on that.
Yeah.
You're talking about ideas. One of the things that I do that's been so helpful for me over the last several years is that each morning I've got an idea notebook and I just put in there 10 ideas. And it's not a to-do list or a jobs list. It's just, I'm creating 10 ideas, 10 ideas for my business, 10 ideas for my family, 10 ideas of new products, new programs. And then I go through there on a regular basis and then go back and kind of analyze them and say, which one am I most motivated or the easiest for me to implement in my world? And so I just recently got back from a trip from Cuba. That's been a goal of mine, and that came from my idea notebook. I wanted to do that before some of the changes happened. And then just recently I went out, I have a passion for photography. I'm a seascape photographer. And so I just got back from a trip to California that started as an idea that I took action on, and the idea of doing 10 ideas a day in the notebook, it's unimaginable the things that have happened in my world and how that's benefited me. It's just been a real great thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then how do you go back and so I think you mentioned part of it, but so you have, almost 100 ideas a week. How do you choose which ones you're going to act on?
Well, number one, a lot of them just happen naturally. I don't know how it works, but somehow, just by me writing them down in the notebook, somehow brings them forth in my life, and they happen. But a lot of them, but really the ones that really do happen, what I do is I go back with a highlighter because I write it in pen, and I've got notebooks, and I've been doing this for years, so I have literally hundreds, just like you said, it's hundreds and hundreds of ideas, and it's multiple notebooks now. But what I do is I take a highlighter and I go back and I highlight the ones that I want to do. Then I bring those over and start to add them to, say, an action plan or a calendar, or start to bring some effort into those. But goal setting, I talked earlier about Think and Grow Rich. Really, goal setting in college, I tested it. I said, what is this thing about goal setting? And so I wrote down on a piece of paper like 15 goals of mine and stuck it over my desk. And then then I checked on it like 6 months later, and then almost 75, maybe almost all the items on the list had been accomplished. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like magic. This is like some incredible. How did that happen? And I wasn't ever, I didn't grow. It wasn't something I was ever taught. And so it's just amazing how that works.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy how when you bring things into consciousness, and then focus on them, like you said, putting it over your desk or putting it somewhere you pay attention. It's amazing how even that teeny bit of work can have some incredible results. And then when you really focus in on top of that, like you said, it almost feels like things happen magically just by doing that step, which I've seen myself. And then when you really get aggressive and say, okay, I'm super serious about this goal, how do I implement a little bit of time each day to move toward it? Then it's even faster. But it's definitely really interesting how life works like that, and how our minds work, or how that all comes together. And it's also interesting, like, how many people you ask them what their goals are and they have no idea.
Yes.
So
and I'm working my goal, one of my big goals is, and I'm thinking about changing this, but one of my big goals right now is I want to help uh, businesses grow by $10 billion. And so I'm approaching I'm not over a billion yet. I'm approaching a billion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my thought was 10 billion. And so that's been like one of the, just a big far out there goal. But also at the same time, this is something to think about. This is something I've discovered. And Gabe, since you've set goals and you're aware of this, and maybe you can share your thoughts on this as well. When you accomplish a goal, the heavens don't open and trumpets don't play and cars don't stop on the street because I accomplished some goal. And, and what I'm trying to say there is like life doesn't begin when you accomplish a goal. And so I used to think the other way around. I used to think, oh my gosh, if I get at one point in time, if I get the custom made suit or I get this particular car, or I achieve this or this is, then my life can start, but it doesn't happen that way. And I thought things would change. I was the same person after I accomplished some of my goals early on than I was beforehand. I thought it would be different. I thought I'd be more confident. I thought I'd be a better person, or I was somehow better, or my ego, I'd be a bigger person accomplishing the goals. But that's not what happens. That's not the way it is. And so there's a life. You have to live your life on the way to accomplishing those goals.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. There's definitely satisfaction in accomplishing your goals. I wouldn't,
Yes.
I'm not saying that, but when you hit the sales goal, you build the business, you sell the product, you sell the business, you get the fancy car or the big house. There's no deep meaning associated with that, unfortunately.
Right.
So that's why I like my short-term goals, because they kind of keep me in focus day to day, but I like my long-term big goals because that keeps me focused and engaged. But I think to kind of answer your question, the only goal accomplishments that really mean something to me are those that are outside of myself, like helping, donating to a charity that I really care about, or helping somebody turn around a business when they're really in trouble, or impacting lives outside of my own. Accomplishments for just accomplishment's sake, for my own, the stuff I get out of it is pretty low meaning, unfortunately. Yep. Or unfortunately, like getting the fancy car or doing things just isn't, there's nothing great about it, unfortunately. It's okay, but it's not as good as you would think.
Yeah, and that's what I was all about. I wanted to win. I wanted to be number one. I wanted to, achieve the sales results and those sorts of things early on. And so my goals aren't like that now. My goals list is almost nothing on there. My original goals were like material possessions. And so much of my goals today, and I try to write my goals out every morning. I don't do them at night, but I rewrite them every day, my goals list on paper. Mm-hmm. It's just something I do for myself. But there's like no material possessions on there, whereas my goals 25, 30 years ago was all about material, like what I wanted to buy, what I wanted to get, money. Now I've got, and this is something that's just started I've not done this before the last, started this about a year ago, was the roles that I play. And so I try to list on my goals. I have all the important people in my life and the role that I play for those people, whether it be, I'm a leader of my company, I'm a husband, I'm a father of 4, I'm a grandfather of 2. My nephew is very important to me, and so I've, different friends, my board of advisors, business associates, and so I'm thinking about them, and it's kind of sad to admit this, but that's helped me to have stronger relationships. So, like for instance, first time I've ever bought tickets and taken my wife dancing was just this past year. We've gone dancing in the past, but it was more like, she would like to go, or let's go do this. It wasn't something I thought of on my own. Yeah. Purchase the tickets and set the date up. It wasn't until I had this thought about, okay, what is my role here, and what are some positive actions I can do, kind of on my side. And it's terrible to think about it like that, but because it sounds so negative when I admit that I haven't done that. But I don't like to dance, but it's so funny Tracy's my wife. She's like, "Tim, you dance better tonight than you ever have." And I was like, "What do you mean? I don't understand." She goes, "Well, you're the one that bought the ticket, so you're actually learning. There's like a little instruction ahead of time, a little event. It was a neat event,
Yeah.
and it was just exciting. So I learned more. And it was just kind of an interesting takeaway on my goals there. I just wanted to share.
Yeah, that's definitely where I think as you become successful, and I think those early goals aren't wrong at all. I think to want the big house or
Yes,
the nice car or to hit your revenue mark or something
right,
is super important in your development. But I'm glad that
right,
you brought that up because it's when you do hit that, you're not going to feel wonderful like you maybe thought you would. But then,
right.
like you said, when you start to shift to looking outside yourself to who you can help or how you can build those relationships deeper or anything like that, that's real satisfaction. And one thing that only over, I mean, and I'm a couple years younger than you. I just turned 35, so I the one thing that I've seen happen just internally in myself over the last couple of years, as I've reached some stability points in business, and we're still growing, and I have some major goals there, but I've seen when some of those material things are taken care of and you don't worry about them anymore, I definitely feel that shift too, where I've gone from thinking what are my 5-year goals, which I thought that was forever before, to
Right.
what are my 25 years goals personally, which is one, for business and what I want to do. But I've started thinking like, what are my 100-year goals? Like, what do I want my son's grandkids to experience because of what I've been able to contribute, and
Wow.
what can my team, how can I make their life better, all the folks that are on the team here, and like, what real lasting impact can I leave on the world, not just like making money or having something nice, like that's just so, you know it's so
Yes,
inconsequential. And so
exactly.
it definitely brings so much more meaning to life, and I think it's such a richer life when you're thinking like that and working towards those type of things than just your bank balance or the
Yeah,
car
and
or whatever.
to kind of bring some detail to it. Really, this hit home for me several years ago. A friend of mine, whatever reason, I don't know why it came up, but it just came up. He had 12 cars at his house, and he was kind of complaining about it. And that, there were reasons he had all the 12 vehicles. He needed them for different. He had several teenagers. He had, different vehicles for different functions, and depending on what. But he still had to worry about 12 cars getting the oil changed. He had to worry about, 48 tires that have to be driven. You have to take it and have the tires changed if it gets, if they're needed. And it reminds me at one time, this is many, many years ago, at one time I unfortunately had 3 houses at one time. And to manage that and the detail and the work, I mean, it takes you away from your focus, your mission, and you just, like you said, your legacy. What is it you want to leave to people? The fact that you can see to it that all this is maintained, or is there something you can do that would, provide some benefit in their life? And
Yeah.
one of the things that I ignored early on, and that is probably one of the biggest, we're talking about entrepreneurs here and some opportunities, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to hear that. A lot of people don't want to hear it that don't take advantage of it, but exercise and diet. I thought I could avoid those issues or avoid worrying about spending time in that area, and I'd be more focused on my goals and accomplishment. But I just can't share enough with you. We've talked, Gabe, you brought up the word mindset multiple times in our call today,
Hmm.
and diet and exercise along with sleep are major parts or components of mindset. And I really didn't understand that well enough a long time ago. And now a big part of my day, a big part of my goals, what I want to accomplish, I've got daily goals, weekly goals, is swimming. I want to be in the pool and I want to swim so many laps. And it's just, along with my diet, it's just amazing, absolutely amazing, the difference that will make in your business. And I'd go so far to think that 30%, I'd guess that 30% of the businesses that fail, I'd bet a lot on it that diet and exercise played a massive role in that, a lot more so than people ever will imagine or give credit for.
I would completely agree, and that's definitely something that I've learned and been kind of relearning over the last few years as well. One of my focuses for the end of this year has been increasing my productivity and my time management. And one book I read called The Productivity Project was awesome, because he talks about how, getting enough sleep, which is pretty common sense. Like, I don't think anybody's like, oh, I don't need to sleep. That part makes sense. But when the guy that wrote this book did like all these different tests over the course of a year to see where he felt like he got the most productivity and results from. And he found that like getting up, taking a walk, taking a break, and going out and doing physical exercise increased his focus and productivity. He got more done by stopping work to go do that.
Yes.
It's like it seems it's pretty simple, and I think everybody listening is probably nodding their head and saying like, yeah, that's a great idea. But I would challenge everybody, just like you're saying, to put it into action, because one of the things that I'm trying to do more as well is, for a few years I did really, really well going to the gym every morning, at 5:30, and like it was great. It definitely improved my health, and I still have benefits from that period. But I've fallen into getting too aggressive in my day-to-day schedule and not doing that as much. And so just this week I started re-implementing getting out, doing 30 minutes exercise. And in the like middle of the afternoon or whenever you're tired and you're like, man, I know I need to push through this. If you stop work then and you go out and exercise or take a walk or do something physically to take care of your body, you'll come back with such amazing focus and energy that it doesn't matter if you took 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it was, it's not lost time. And I think that's when you're really kind of grinding it out as an entrepreneur. I think you think that you're sacrificing that time by taking care of yourself, when in fact you're actually stealing from yourself and hurting yourself when you don't take that break, which is not what you would think. So exactly.
It's always counterintuitive. I agree with you.
Yeah. So yeah, I would completely agree. And I would say you're definitely right. I mean, who knows what the actual stats are, but not taking care of yourself physically will kill your business, period.
I would count. I'm on a board of a real estate company based in Atlanta, Georgia. And so the leader of the real estate company, we're having some he's having some problems in the business and some different issues. And so I was going through some marketing fixes and some ideas and some things to help the business. And these are all, I hate to call them 1% fixes, but they were like 5% fixes, 3% fixes. Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking about, because exercise has been such a big part of particularly the last year or so for me. And so I asked them, I said, before we go any further, is there anything different about your physical routine? Have you been exercising, or is there anything going on so that your diet or your exercise? And he said, well, actually, Tim, about 2 weeks ago, I hurt my foot and I've not been able to exercise for the last 2 weeks. And so that was it. I mean, that was really the answer. The reason he was in such a bad slump was he hasn't been exercising. He's been lounging around. He's been upset and depressed about different things in the business and not able to really take action. And that was the problem in his business and what was going on. It wasn't the marketing or some great, novel new idea concept to help drive the business. It was the fact that he physically was not able to take him to his exercise. Just that simple.
Yeah, that's crazy. You would never think that, but it's definitely true.
Yeah. I did, yeah, and we were spending all this time. I'm trying to be, so smart, and use my marketing to help solve, my marketing background and things to help solve his problems, and that really was it.
Yeah, it's amazing the mental, upswing and value you get out of just exercising. All the endorphins and all the good things that happen, and you burn off stress. And I mean, it just makes you such a better decision maker, a better performer in any role. I mean, it's, like you said, it's not what you first connect the dots to, but it definitely has a huge impact. So couldn't agree more. Well, I have really enjoyed our time today, Tim, and this has been really valuable. I appreciate you sharing your story and all the tips and strategies and inputs that you have. I'd love to have you back again in the future, because this was a lot of fun, and we can dig into some more specifics. But before we wrap up, is there any last words of advice you'd share, anything kind of sayings or mantras you live by? And then also, where is a good place for people to reach you and connect with you?
I mean, just a fun little quick thing to end it on, and we can, there's a lot to go into, but, there's so much we're doing so much in a digital world and so important, but still at the same time, I like people to think for a second and make sure they're taking care. There's non-digital opportunities in their business to grow it. Even though there's so much to be done in digital, you need to be taken care of. And I call them the 5 S's. And for me, this has resulted not just in millions of dollars in new business, but tens of millions, if not more. But my 5 S's, and that that I like to share, and I think it's kind of funny, but is swag, sampling, signage, stickers, and sponsorships. And what I'm getting to on swag, for me, it could be T-shirts or anything with a logo on it. But it's funny to think that T-shirt was the first social media that was out there for companies, and so there's still a place for swag in your business, and use that. Sampling, it goes without question. Anything you can do to get the customer to sample, try your product, whether it be a new car, park them, get people into it, whatever. So many people forget about signage when they're looking at locations, when they're thinking about growing their business. How can signage grow that business? What can they do? That's a very low. You don't think of signage as being very technical, but there's so much that signage can do to grow a business, and massive. And whether that's at retail or supplying signage to your customers to help them sell more of your product or help them be more successful. Also, stickers, just sharing stickers. And the last one, sponsorships. We talked about that a little bit when talking about VCs, but what can you do to tie in and build relationships with other folks? And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've done, and how I've been able to take customers who really have very little traction, very little success, and to really expand them and grow them quickly. And that's through sponsorships. And I'm being very loose with the definition of sponsorships, but it's looking at participating with other companies and growing through their customer list and who their customers are. And anyway, so excellent. But I want to thank you. My website, if people want to learn more about me, they can go to timforrest.com. Also, Gabe, what I'll do, I've got some great resources. Okay. I've got an IP, a manual on IP. So entrepreneurs that are curious about it, should I use a trade secret? We haven't talked about IP, but should we do a trade secret? Should I patent this idea? What should I do? I've got a great resource there, and I'll put that up, and we'll put it under the name of I'll send you the link, and you can share that. It'll just be for your listeners, and they can download for free. They'll download that. And also I'll throw in my book. I've got a glossary of retail terms, and then also, we haven't talked about some of the other areas, but I'll put a couple other freebies up there that folks can go to my website. It'll be timforrest.com, then with your podcast name there at the end of it, and they can just go straight there. Perfect. And download everything for free. They don't have to sign up for anything. They just can download it, and if they want to sign up for anything, there'll be something there as well to do that. Fantastic. And to reach me, timforrest.com. Also, I'm a prolific seascape photographer. I love to share my work. They can go to islandsunrises.com and see that. And Gabe, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
All right. Thank you so much, Tim. We'll have you on again soon.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
You've been listening to Today's Business Leaders with Gabe Arnold. Remember to subscribe on iTunes. For more information, visit todaysbusinessleaders.com.